Hello, everyone. Welcome to Turning Point Australia. Let me know if you guys are not able to hear this conversation, but this is going to be an absolutely amazing conversation with Graham Hood and I, former pilot Graham Hood. We really wanted to take this opportunity, which is it doesn't happen often enough, where we sort of stop and smell the roses and see where we stand with the movement, where it's going. Are we seeing success or not? And I'm pleased to say that since the movement of everyone's going to Canberra, we've seen an amazing move in the mainstream narrative. And it's been absolutely insane to see how positive it is. Now, there's about 400 of you listening right now. Please give this a share, get it out there. I want everyone to hear exactly the positive news about this, because I'm so sick of hearing about all the politics and the interpersonal drama. I've got some great news and I'm here to celebrate it with Graham Hood, and I want to get it out there. Now, I've got a list of over 20 links of positive news. These are articles, these are opinion pieces, these are just amazing things happening in Australia, but also around the world. And I really want to get it out to you guys so you can see that this movement's actually yielding some success. But before we get started, Graham, welcome to the show. It's so good to finally have a chat with you again.
Yeah, great to see you again, Joel, although you're looking a bit blurry.
Is that right?
I don't know.
It might be. In a second, I might just I'm going to bring up the article. Oh, it is. There we go. Beautiful. I really want to go through these articles with you guys. Now, I'm not going to go in depth with them. I just want you to see exactly the titles of them, and you generally get the gist of what's going on. But before we get there, Graham, before you set out to Canberra, there were a number of things that you requested of government. There are a number of things that you said, I'm going to Canberra for these reasons. And if you're with me, you're with me. If you're not, you're not. If you're for violence, I don't want to hear, I don't want a bar of it. But you essentially went there and you presented these reasons. And I found it really interesting because you were very, very specific with them. First off, you said, number one, open state borders and keep them that way. Number two, no medical passports for domestic travel. Number three, end the jab rollout for minors effective immediately with no possibility of recommencing until the trial phase ends, minimum. Number four, let all Australians return to work to save our healthcare system and support struggling industries. And number five, no mask mandates for minors. Now, obviously, there are a lot of other things that we forget about, the nuances of these restrictions. But I really wanted to define exactly why you went there, because as Jordan Peterson says, you define the reasons why you're doing something. You define the parameters for success or failure, and that way it's measurable. Otherwise, there's no point. We're just sort of marching around the walls of Jericho, not really doing anything. So with that in mind, I really want to go through and just read out the titles of these opinion pieces. Keep those targets in mind, those things that Graham said, and you'll see exactly what I'm talking about here. And I think you'll be very encouraged to see exactly what I'm talking about. All right. This is in my notes, guys, because literally I've been adding to this list just now. Like this, the articles are still pouring in. When it rains, it pours. That's what's going on. So just briefly, I'm going to read these articles' titles out. Opinion piece. Hear the protesters out and you might agree with them. Next one. Underlying health issues involved in 92% of Aussie COVID deaths. Next one. Huge state by-election swing puts Morrison on red alert. Next one. New South Wales Treasurer claims the by-election result is a crucial message to government that they must listen to. You can't ignore a crowd that big. Ben Fordham addresses the convoy to Canberra. Dr. Kerry Chan taking long service leave to be with family for 3 weeks. Restrictions are dropping. See, they're phasing her out. This is excellent. New South Wales Premier announces easing of COVID restrictions. Western Australia opens up as of the 3rd of March. New South Wales backtracks on making vaccine boosters mandatory for health workers. Mind you, that one was actually before the march. I want to be completely honest about that one. The next one, Queensland scraps mask mandates from the 4th of March. The tide is turning against vaccine mandates. Chris Kenny, Sky News. Federal MP Lou O'Brien praises behaviour of protesters. Chris Ullman does a segment with Graham Hood. I think that was on Channel 9, wasn't it, Graham?
Yeah, it was, yeah. Only brief.
I think a lot of people supported you when they saw that one. The next one was South Australia Police Union come out against the mandates. That was a really amazing one because the police then responded, and then they said, "Oh no, we're not seeing an uptick in crime." And then the South Australia Union come out and they're like, "No, we have, and here are the stats. This is ridiculous. We don't support the mandates." I thought that was amazing for South Australians to see. Victoria ditches mask mandates. Restrictions ease in Victoria. Density limits in hospitality venues are scrapped. People will no longer need to check in at supermarkets and retail venues, and dance floors are back. New South Wales and Victoria ease restrictions at the same time. That was really amazing because it seems like they're following in lockstep, that Dan Andrews and Dominic Perrottet. Where are they now? The end of restrictions exposes the senseless COVID scaremongering. I think that was an opinion piece by Joe Hildebrand, actually, and I think I've doubled up there. The futility of mandatory masking now ripped bare. That's Adam Crichton at The Australian, excellent economist. Nick Coatsworth claims Omicron is clearly not more dangerous than the flu, and boosters and masks are unnecessary for most Australians.
Wow.
And this is where it gets great. Kids' vaccination rate plummets with parents uncertain about the jab. New South Wales phases out twice weekly rat tests for kids and teachers. Barnaby Joyce promises to listen to anti-vaccine and anti-mandate deplorables. I mean,
Barnaby.
Yeah, Barnaby, well, I think you got to him, Graham. OECD General Secretary Matthias Cormann has said there needs to be an evidence-based assessment of the effectiveness of lockdowns during the COVID-19 pandemic and their impact on domestic violence, mental health, and alcohol consumption. Matthias Cormann's not no one. He used to be the finance minister, the treasurer for the government, and then he resigned from government. And then overseas, we've been seeing amazing news because they've had their own convoys in New Zealand and Canada and America. The American one's going on now. Boris Johnson announces an end of almost all COVID-19 restrictions in England. Prime Minister Jacinta Ardern says the nation's vaccine pass and mandate system will begin to lift once New Zealand is through its Omicron peak in March. And what's not in there is the Democrat states in America. They're also in a situation where they're not actually going for the mandates anymore, whether it be masks, and we're seeing it across Europe as well. This is, Graham, what's your response to all this?
Well, I thought you were really thorough, but you left one out.
What was that?
Adelaide University has dropped mandates.
Oh, I'll add it now. That's awesome. That's so good.
Look, that's really encouraging news, and it's hard to see that when we look. Because, well, for one, I haven't had the time to even scratch myself, let alone look at this stuff. So I'm really glad people like you are doing this, Joel. And we need to be focusing on the good news stuff. And while these are all great and they indicate an easing, there is still much to do, especially after these mandates are dropped and everything, because we need never, ever in this country go down that road again. There needs to be a full independent judicial inquiry into how this has all come about, the monumental mistakes, blunders, or deliberate things that have been done to bring this about, and it must never happen again. The Australian people have been crushed, regardless of their desire to be vaccinated or not, by what these governments have done. We've seen premiers go rogue. That must never be allowed to happen again. There's a whole raft of issues that have to be dealt with, but we have to deal with the battle now. These things mean that the pressure is off kids who are killing themselves at an alarming rate. A friend of mine has a nephew, I think it was, who has lost 8 friends to suicide, I think in the 15-year age group, in 6 months, 5 in Victoria and 3 in New South Wales. It's the safety of the kids. It's also the Parents with Questions campaign to get people aware of what's going on with vaccinating children. And that's been highly successful, and hats off to Adam Gibson and the crew at PWQ for that. These things are vitally important. We must make sure that we learn from the mistakes, we uncover any skullduggery that's brought this about, and we get this thing cleaned up. So all these are positive steps, and it shows that we're on track. As long as we remain peaceful, we keep our message clean and crisp and direct, we have a much better opportunity to reach those who are sitting at home watching mainstream media.
Absolutely. And so, if you're just tuning in now, then 1,600 of you, give this a share, get it out there. We want the good news to get out there about what's happening in the country. I just ran through over 20 article titles just to let people know. I'll put the list up maybe later tonight or tomorrow so you can all have access to these articles. This is excellent. This is amazing. I think it's phenomenal that this is how far we've come. You know, Graham, it was when was our first interview? It was only, I think, was it November or was it August, it was the only time. What was that?
October, when you bawled your eyes out.
Yeah, thanks, Graham, for padding that. So when Graham wants me to react, he starts singing, and he pulled that out of nowhere that day. He didn't even. It's funny because we had a 2-hour Zoom call before that. Didn't sing once, and then he springs it on me on a live stream, and I'm like, damn it! He just, the waterworks started. It's been so encouraging seeing you on the mainstream media. I genuinely, I think you hit the nail on the head when you're in Canberra. You said, we've got to treat these people with respect. They genuinely believe this. They genuinely believe this stuff. Do they censor some of these stories? Do they have a narrative? Yes, but they do actually buy into it. And it's really hard to see that, because it's like, until you see yourself in those politicians and yourself in the reporters, then you will never convert them. They'll only think that you're coming at them and you're a Looney Tune. But I really think that the face that you presented, Graham, and I take my hat off to you and to the 1,700 people listening live right now. Thank you for what you've done. And thank you to God. Thank you to everyone that rocked up to Canberra. Thank you to everyone that worked behind the scenes to make all these stories happen. Thank you to the journalists that have been brave to come out. Chris Ullman, thank you so much for what you've done. This has been a tough 2 years for everyone. People have lost jobs. People, Graham, you only have to look at your inbox to see how many suicides are in there or how many people know someone from suicide. It's like, this was a hard slog. And, the establishment, in my opinion, I think things are turning. And it's sad because it's like, okay, are you doing this because of the election, or are you doing this, and are you going to go back to your totalitarian, original starting point? But I think the important thing to learn here is we've got to teach our kids what pain we went through and how hard it was to win the fight. And we need to always remember that we're nothing without God in achieving this. But yeah, Graham, when I first sent some of these articles to you, you were tearing up yourself, actually, especially the ones relating to the kids.
Yep, absolutely, because that's why we're there. And there's going to come a time in the future where our kids and grandkids will ask, where were you in 2022? Where were you when all this was happening? Where were you when we were losing our freedom? What were you doing? Were you sitting on the couch? Were you sitting there criticising being an armchair keyboard warrior, or were you out there doing something? I'm fully aware that a lot of people are not particularly enamoured with what I'm presenting and the reasons I'm doing it. I understand that, but I've never signed a contract with anyone to do anything. I'm one particular person sharing my point of view that happens to be shared with I don't know, maybe a couple of million Australians in the middle ground. And that's what I signed up to do, and that's what I'm committed to do. And for me, that's the most important thing. We need to be able to stand in the pages of history, in the stream of time, and say that when we were needed, we were there. And none of these shifts could happen unless the people put their boots on the ground. And the Australian people are incredible. They are resilient when their backs are to the fence. They are resilient when they're challenged, and they are very mindful of the spirit of those who, as I often say, lay under the 100,000 white crosses on foreign battlefields. Their sacrifice isn't lost on a lot of Australians now, and I hope more and more will wake up to that.
With the 2022 is the year of elections, and as most people know, you are apolitical. You've just been trying to get results for the average Aussie, the people that are contacting you. And I guess the big message that I'm trying to send through Turning Point is, this is how you can vote. This is how to be educated on what's going on. We don't play favorites. We want to make sure that, everyone re-empowered like you once were. People once knew how to vote and engage in their democracy a lot better. But things have changed, obviously, of late. And a lot of people have been trying to play catch up to learn as quickly as possible how their government works. And so, guys, I really am encouraging you to get involved, to understand who's running in your elections. If you're in South Australia, you've got a state election coming up, I think on the 19th of March. And if you're looking around the country, we've got a federal election at the end of May. And it's going to be interesting. But one thing I really wanted to talk about, and this wasn't in the list of articles, Graham, is there's been an absolutely massive civil war going on in the Liberal Party. I mean, don't get me wrong. When we were in Canberra, we had some amazing chats with some of the parliamentarians there. There was obviously Craig Kelly was there. He took you into Parliament, but there was also senators from the government. There was Senator Gerard Rennick. There was, I don't think Senator Antti could make it. He was in South Australia, but Pauline Hanson did come out as senator, and Malcolm Roberts. Also, George Christensen, the lower house MP as well, was there. And those MPs that weren't there, they expressed their support online. But it was really amazing to see what's been going on, because I felt like they were really emboldened while we were there, because for once we sort of burst the Canberra bubble by being on their doorstep and saying, hey, we're watching you and we don't like what's been going on. And we know the election's not till May, but we cannot wait to send a message to you. We came from across the continent to tell you stop. And I think we're seeing the results of that. But what I've been seeing, and this is what a lot of my contacts have been telling me about, there is a civil war going on in the Liberal Party. Just as those parliamentarians I listed before have been empowered, we're seeing this amazing fight go on. There's many people have heard me talk about the different sort of factions in the Liberal Party. You've got the Conservatives, you've got the left wings, you've got the moderate right and moderate left. We can't pretend that the Liberal Party is a monolith and that they all share the same thoughts. A Tanya Davies, who's been fighting tirelessly to end the areas of concern and the mandates, is not the same as a Malcolm Turnbull. There's a big difference. And what's been going on right now, which a lot of people haven't seen, is over the last week, there have been some lawsuits going on between the state Liberal Party and the federal Liberal Party. And this is really important, guys. A lot of you might switch off, but this is the stuff that actually really is making a change right now. And Scott Morrison is really fearful of. As you know, there are parties like the Freedom Parties. They've already selected their candidates. Labor have already selected their candidates for the federal election in May. But the Liberal Party have like 22 seats they haven't selected yet. Why? Because what's going on is Scott Morrison, the way pre-selection works, where they select who they want to run in a seat, is there's a council of electors, and the Prime Minister has a representative that sits on that council. That guy is called Alex Hawke. He's from Scott Morrison's faction. You don't like him. He doesn't believe in freedom and the policies that Graham's fighting for. Well, what he does is he has a role to play in selecting who will run for the Liberal Party in certain seats. So rather than selecting a Tanya Davies who would fight for our freedom, he'd be more inclined to select someone like Gladys Berejiklian, who we don't really like. And so what's been going on is there's been this massive conflict of interest where his selection, because he's up for one of these 22 seats, and a lot of other seats are really vulnerable to Conservatives fighting and voting in their party to take the pre-selection. So we have Conservative people running in the Liberal Party.
You see, this is why the major party system of politics in Australia is so flawed. Where are the people in all of this? Where are the voters? Where is the electorate in all of this argy-bargy between factions within parties? We're over it. We're done with it. It has to be, the House has to be filled with citizens who are there strictly to represent their constituents. Full stop. Not be faithful to some political party, Joel. And what you're saying, yeah, it's encouraging, but how often do we see it? How many times do we have to turn on to a television station to see a Peter Dutton say that he's fully behind the Prime Minister, and we know that he's not? We saw Scott Morrison say that he was behind Malcolm Turnbull. We've heard them all say these things. We've heard it in the Labor Party, pledging allegiance to somebody while you're holding a knife and twisting it in their back. This is why the system is not working, because there is no honour and there is no integrity in too many people who represent the people of this nation. And that must be a change that has to be adopted. We have to, you can get hung parliaments, you can get people twisted around, having to appease minor parties and minor factions and whatever. But we have to, some way, the people of Australia have to get control of what's going on in there in a peaceful way. And the only mechanism we have to do that peacefully and lawfully in this country now is to educate ourselves and elect the people in there that we need to elect in there and make sure we support them. I am, read my lips, absolutely apolitical. I have been invited to run in a couple of parties. I will not run. I am not going to support any party, and I will not seek any kind of selection to run. It's not what I'm cut from the cloth to do. But I tell you this, don't tell me that I can't talk to somebody who is in there. Don't tell me that I can't go and have a chat to Craig Kelly or Malcolm Roberts, which I've done, or George Christensen, which I've done, because I need to understand the lay of the land. I'm doing that as Graham Hood, the citizen. I'm not doing that as a representative of the people of Australia. I'm doing what you guys have an opportunity to do, to educate yourselves. I'm going in to find out what it's like in the belly of the beast. And I will continue to speak to whoever I choose to speak to, not to do deals for the Australian people. I'm not empowered to do that. I'm not elected to do that. I'm educating myself. Before I go flying anywhere in arduous weather conditions, I made sure I was thoroughly briefed on what the conditions were going to be, what it was going to be like at my destination, what it was going to be like at my alternate. Do I have enough fuel? And if people don't like that I'm talking to these other politicians or other people of interest, then okay, that's your thing and that's fine. But that doesn't mean because I talk to Malcolm Roberts that I endorse One Nation. I have been in touch with Malcolm Roberts today because he was in Senate estimates asking questions of the AFP, and I've been chasing up with him about finding out what's going on with the AFP, what is going on with this supposed secret legislation in Canberra. Is there any truth to it? And why wouldn't I ask somebody who's come out in Senate estimates and asked these questions himself? So we have to keep all of this in perspective.
Absolutely,
I'm doing what I'm doing as an Australian citizen, Graham Hood, for me and my wife. I'm doing that for us. And other people are happy that I'm doing that and other people aren't, but then other people can do what they wish to do. It's fine. So as long as we understand that's what's going on.
Absolutely, yeah.
You'll never see my name on a ballot paper, and you'll never see me support anyone who has a name on a ballot paper. And my vote will be cast privately and secretly, and no one will know who I voted for.
God bless you. Yeah. And I think, Graham, when you first came out and, obviously you were being bombarded with calls and we had our chat, a lot of people, especially when you started, they were trying to pressure you to become a political candidate. And I remember having that chat with you and saying, no, I think you've got to take more of the thought leader sort of route. You tend to represent people's concerns, and in many ways that's actually more powerful. I was just listening before I hopped on to Jordan Peterson. He was asked that very question. Would you run for politics? Especially with everything going on with Trudeau. He's been asked this question many, many times. Every 5 years he contemplates it. And he ultimately comes to the conclusion of no. Well, it'd tie my time up too much, and he wouldn't be able to. I mean, and you can really measure Jordan Peterson because it's like the amount of effect and the lives he's impacted through his books and his lecture series is unfathomable. I mean, he's impacted my life in many ways. He set me on this journey to sort of help everyone in Australia when I lost my job, and I think it's amazing because that's what you're doing. In similar fashion, different flavor, Aussie flavor, but it's in similar fashion. And what I was going to say before was, there are many different ways that we can change this. And I think, but from reading the titles of those articles, you can really see the different ways that people have been helping. And that's why it's no one person can take credit for it. It's literally everyone's been playing their bit, and that spirit of Australia has been taking over.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Anyone who's in this to get credit or get financial reward or to get following is not in it for the right reason. we discussed before we went to air that I've got a pretty large following on Facebook, which will probably explode sooner rather than later, because that's how Facebook is. But I would happily give my following, hand my following over to you or to anyone else who wants it, because I'm not interested in. I'm not in it for that. I'm in it to be. I was a couple of times in my history within the airline I worked for, I was offered pretty good management positions. And on one occasion, I was offered a position which related to a proposal I put forward to have a certain management position created so that people felt connected more to senior management from the front line than they actually did. And I did a paper. I went to America to work with United Airlines on this particular project, and I came back with some recommendations. And so they said, look, we agree with your recommendations. We think what you're offering is great. And they said to me, why don't you, we're offering you that position. We're going to create that position and give it to you. And I said, no, I don't want it. And they said, what do you mean you don't want it? I said, no, I went over there to study it, develop it, and hand it to you because I want to work within that system. I don't want to run it. I want somebody else to run it. I want to be in it. What I'm doing now is because I want to live in a society that I think we can create by doing this. I don't want to be its leader. I want to be part of it, to live in it, not be at the top of it. So, and trying to convince people that there's no other ulterior motive has been the bane of the last 6 months. Trying to convince people. A lovely lady yesterday got on my Facebook page after I posted Michelle's testimony, which touched a lot of people. And she said, I've got to be honest, there's something about you that I just don't trust. I get that you're nice and all of that sort of stuff, but my intuition's never wrong. She said, I'm normally right, and I've got a suspicion about you, and I just can't shake it. And everyone was getting into it. They were getting stuck into it. How dare you? No. And I said, oh, no, hang on. I was so refreshed by what she said. I said to her, thank God you said that. Truly, and I truly meant it, because I want you to be a critical thinker. I want anyone who's listening to me to apply critical thought to what they do. I'm not after followers. I'm after people to start thinking for themselves. And if you have doubts, then act into those doubts. And if you find anything about me that concerns you, give me an opportunity to respond, and I will give you the truth to the best of my ability. And I said, good on you. I really praise you for doing that. And I just ask everybody to leave her alone, because she's actually doing something that we should all be doing. Don't follow me. Don't follow Craig Kelly. Don't follow Malcolm Roberts, Pauline Hanson. Follow yourself. You've got a mind and a heart. Connect them and follow your intuition and do what you need to do. I watched Forrest Gump yesterday. Yeah. I just felt compelled to watch it. I remember watching it in a cinema, and I hadn't watched it since. And I don't know why. I realise now why I watched it. Forrest Gump was a very average individual. He was obviously a fictional character, but he obviously had autism, and his IQ was fairly low, and his whole life just developed out of his honesty. He was just totally honest about who he was and how he saw the world. His mum said, life's like a box of chocolates. You never know what you're going to get. But he had to deal with pain in a specific way. He was rejected and let down a lot because of his honesty and because of his autism. And he started to run. Every time he felt in pain, he would run. Every time he felt threatened, he would run. And there's a scene in the movie where he runs for 3.5 years. And he's just jogging. He's not saying anything to anybody, but people are following. There goes that guy again. What's happening? And before he knows it, he's got this massive following of joggers behind him. And he gets into the middle of Dead Man's Valley, I think they call it in Arizona, and he's on this freeway, and he just stops. And all the crowd behind him, they all prop, and they all say, shut up, listen, he's about to say something, because they haven't heard him speak. And he turns around and he looks at him. He says, I'm tired. I think I'm going to go home. And he turns and he runs back along the way that he came, in between the 1,000 people that were running behind him. And they all look at him like this, and they go, what do we do now? Where do we go? What happens now? Please, everybody, please, I beg you. I'm not Hoodie, I'm Forrest Gump.
Yeah.
Forrest Gump. I don't know how long I'm in this for. If you're hanging your hopes on me, you may follow me up a road and have me turn around and say, I can't do this anymore. I'm going home. I'm Forrest Gump. And I want you to think of me that way, because if you're hanging your hat on my coat rack, I might fall over and let you down. I don't have the answers. I don't have an education. I don't understand the political machinations. I don't understand what goes into the heads of some people in the freedom movement. So I'm in it for as long as I can be, as long as God wants me to be, for whatever purpose God wants me to be there. And I say God because if anyone likes me, it's because I'm a different person now since I met God. So I'm not going to go anywhere without him, and I'm not going to go anywhere without talking about him. Get used to it, or follow somebody else. So
yeah, absolutely.
Just call me Forrest, will you?
Yeah, I'll call you. Stop calling you Forrest. I'll tell John. Actually, I won't tell you what I'll tell John. Maybe he should start introducing you as Forrest. But it all goes back to that, because that's where the problems came from. It was people not being independent, being leaders in their own life, leaders in their family, their workforce, their society, their democracy, engaging in their democracy, which has led us here. It's their lack of knowledge. It's their lack of independence, which it's not like we never had it. We once had it. People once interacted in their democracy a lot more. They used to be more active. They used to be like, yeah, I want to enlist. I want to fight for my country, because, what we have in Australia is a blip in history, and people forget that. And when it comes to, the actual people being empowered, that's how if you're trying to work out who's who, it's very simple if you look at it like this. Is the person I'm listening to trying to empower me on a personal level, giving me the tools, or are they making me dependent on them? Because that's what Satan does. That's what happens federally. That's what the government's been doing to us. That's what Klaus Schwab wants. That's what the World Economic Forum wants. That's what it comes back to. So when people come up to the street to me and they thank me for things that I've helped them with, like, this is how I did how to vote cards, I'm like, I really wish you didn't rely on my how to vote cards. I wish you had the skills to do it yourself. I'm happy to provide it, but what really gets me going is the things where it's like, okay, I've been listening to Joel for a year and a half now. I think I'm ready. I think I'm ready to, do my own how to vote card, look into the MPs running in my electorate, calling them up. They'll take your calls. Believe it, guys. They'll take your calls. Yeah, absolutely. I mean, they take Graham's calls, and that's what's going on. And what that looks like on a low level, once it happens, it's been happening. Once it happens in mass, it's amazing. And, as I mentioned before, we're seeing it happen right now with federal MPs. With every news story, there's a story behind it. We're seeing it happen in the Liberal Party right now with their civil war. They've got individuals who have been emboldened because courage is infectious. And what we're seeing is people from all over the country come together and say, no, this is how we want things to go now. And so that, what I was mentioning before about pre-selections with Alex Hawke, that wasn't the end of the story. The guy's being sued in court. He was sued yesterday, and he didn't even show up to court today. He didn't even show up. They're running scared because their courage in the government is paper thin. That's what you do to bullies. You stand up to them and you say, no, that's as far as you go. That's my line. I'm here. I'm on your doorstep. I'm in Canberra. I'm in the bubble. I'm here peacefully protesting, and I'm saying enough. And that's what's been happening. So the Liberal Party civil war has been absolutely fascinating. I can't wait to see how it goes. But when it comes to what's been happening on a macro level around the world, it's individuals getting their personal autonomy, freedom, and empowerment back. And Graham, if you don't mind me saying, I think that's what you've been doing. You've been connecting them with God. You've been connecting them with a higher power. You've been connecting them with, listening to their own truth and, self-empowerment in terms of how they can get things done, speaking up, not suffering in silence to the point of suicide, people that are changing their lives and turning it around. So God bless you. God bless you, Graham. You've done a phenomenal job to the detriment of your own health. Thank you so much.
Well, God bless the people of Australia. I mean that. Dear Lord, may you bless the people of this country, all of them. It's starting right at the sovereigns, and work your way through. And he is. So we do what we have to do when the chips are down. That's what Australians do. I would, as I've said many a time in battle, if I were in battle and I had to wear a uniform, you would see a little silver cross on my collar, and you'd see me go over the top of the trenches with the troops with a Bible tucked into my coat, and I'd be with them, and I'd be comforting them if they'd fallen. I'd be there to give them comfort, because that's what my heart wants me to do, and that's what I'm going to do for the rest of my life, is to provide as much comfort for people in distress as I can. I won't get it right. I won't be able to reach everybody. I realise that, but there's a lot of people around me who are reaching people as well. So I want to create a society where we're all there for the benefit of each other, and not for the self benefit that we have seen before this pandemic. This selfishness that, that nothing typifies it more than what Michelle just told me before we came on air. A woman from the East Coast whose father was dying in Western Australia. She hasn't been vaccinated. She contacted the West Australian government to get approval to go to Western Australia to be with her dying father. The reply was, "Do you know what date he's going to die?" And she said, "No, I've been told he's dying." Well, when you've got a more definitive date as when you expect him to die, let us know and we'll look at it then. So the doctors contacted her and said it's urgent. He's not going to last. She got in touch with them, and they still gave her a hard time. And eventually they let her into Western Australia and put her in quarantine for 2 weeks. She arrived at midnight and her dad died. And she asked, could she come out of quarantine and go to the mortuary to spend time with her dad? And they said, "No, you can't." She then was told that she may be able to attend the funeral, but if she does, she'll have to be in full PPE. Now, I'm going to look you straight in the eye if you're watching this. If you're an Australian and you're shrugging your shoulders and say, "Serves her right, she should have been jabbed," then I don't want to call you my brother or sister. Because if that's what sits in your heart, then you've got some serious thinking to do. And the West Australian government has got some serious thinking to do. I mean, if that's where we are in this country, for goodness sakes, how can we say lest we forget on Anzac Day? How can you stand and say lest we forget? Because you have forgotten, and on your head be it. And we have a section of Australian society who thinks that way, just as we have a section of Australian society who's gone along with the mandates, and they're turning up at the rallies and marches because they don't like it. And they don't like that they were coerced into it. And they don't like that they're now being forced to have a third jab. And I tell you, mainstream media, if you think that this is a cakewalk, people are rebelling at having to have a third and fourth jab. The numbers are going to grow. They're not going to dwindle. You've overcooked the goose, Scott Morrison. Premiers, you have overcooked the goose. You have pushed the sale too hard, and the people have walked away from it. You offered them one set of steak knives too many, and they don't want it.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And it's disgusting to see that happen. I mean, there's been so many stories like that in Queensland, WA, Victoria. It's South Australia, the kids, those babies that were, it's ridiculous. And I think that, we're talking about war with Ukraine and Russia and, China, Taiwan, North Korea, South Korea, Iran, guys, you have successfully turned Australia into a bunch of snitches. How am I meant to grab a rifle and stand side by side with the very person that told me that I should have gotten jabbed, to see my dad, in hospital? I mean, that's ridiculous. That's absolutely ridiculous. And I think that the Prime Minister's got a lot to answer for.
If you remember the speech that he made in front of the American President Trump when he visited the White House, where he talked about the quality of society in Australia, his words, when they're replayed with video that somebody's applied to them of people being shot with rubber bullets, old women being pushed to the ground and sprayed with pepper spray, pregnant women at home being arrested because they were organising a rally. When you see all those images tied in with his speech, he is either absolutely out of touch with the Australian people, and I believe he is, or he's absolutely sinister, or he's both. if we're criticising China and Myanmar and what happened in Hong Kong, and we're pointing our finger at civil rights abuses overseas, and we're allowing what's happening in this country, the medical segregation that's going on in this country under his watch, then that is hypocrisy at the highest possible level. And we must not as a nation tolerate a federal leader or state leader who condones that on one hand while speaking the insanity of the speech he made to President Trump when he was in Washington. I mean, it's unconscionable.
Absolutely. I mean, we're meant to be, the Commonwealth. It's not meant to be the divided states of Australia. The Prime Minister is meant to be that unifying force that can bring everyone together. Instead, he was subject to chief health officers of all the different states saying, no, you can't leave, you can't come here, you can't come there, you got to quarantine. It's like, are you a leader, or are you a sheep? Because that's what's going on, Prime Minister. And it's very simple. If he doesn't want to lead, that's fine. Just resign. Don't go to the election. We'll get someone else. We'll have a situation where there's someone we can get behind, because whether you like it or not, we need a leader as a country. And that leader may not come from the freedom parties. We do need someone that we can get behind that will take into consideration the whole of Australia. And in America, Joe Biden said that he was going to unify the country in his inauguration speech. He's done anything but that. It's once again the divided states of America. It's completely changed what they've been trying to do. They've been doing that top-down control.
Let me ask you a question. I see you as politically savvy. You've obviously taken a great interest in the political sciences. Can you name the last statesman we have ever had in this country, federally or state? Can you recall a statesman?
Yeah, probably John Anderson, former Deputy Prime Minister John Anderson.
Yeah. A man in the ilk of Jordan Peterson.
Yeah.
Yeah. And what made John Anderson, actually, you're right. What made John Anderson stand out for me is the fact that he could have achieved so much more, but he didn't have the desire to do that. He didn't have the desire, which makes him even more attractive.
Yeah, it's the George Washington effect. That's what I call it. It's the George Washington effect. And you, sir, you, Graham, you are a victim of this. You do not want power, and that's why people like you. That's why it's hilarious. And John Anderson was the same. I mean, he did have to step down because I think he had cancer or some kind of health impairment. But that's what it is. If you, as a society, if you can find those people that don't want power, and if you can somehow coerce them into running the country, because they genuinely see it as a service. They see it as serving their countrymen. They might not, President Trump, I know a lot of people may not like him. I really liked him. The guy didn't take $1 for his service. He donated, so he was on a $400,000 salary a year. Every $100,000, he'd be paid quarterly. He'd donate that to the latest thing that happened. So if there was a disaster at the military, he'd donate it to the military veterans. If there was a disaster relief because a tornado had blown through, Florida, he'd donate it there. And he didn't take $1 for himself. And I think that's servant leadership that we haven't seen. And that was what George Washington, emulated. He didn't want the power. And that's why I think a lot of people are drawn to you, if you don't mind me saying, Graham, but also John Anderson. His time was cut short. And I think, if I may be so bold, also with George Christensen, the guy's had enough. He's just been hammered. He's been trying to serve the people as much as he wants, as much as he can. He's been trying to free Assange. He's been trying to air out concerns, but that guy's had a gutful, and he's just been, grinding at this stone for years, not just recently. And it's tough, and that's why it's so good when we to see so many people at Canberra, hundreds of thousands of people, increasing the population of Canberra by 50%, because it gave them, for the first time in the history of Canberra, support. Because Canberra is a cesspool. I've been there when there haven't been the hundreds of thousands of people. It's demonic in Parliament House. I mean that. I mean that in the most literal sense of it. Like you walk through the corridors. I asked you this, Graham, when you were there. You walk through the corridors, you can hear the people whispering and scheming. You'll be walking past them. They'll stop talking. And then when you're past further enough, that's like they start whispering again and like, oh, who was that? What was it? It's disgusting. It's unchristian.
I felt like a piece of effluent being processed through a septic tank when I went into Parliament House. It is sinister. And one reporter in there in Craig Kelly's office asked the question, you said in your speech that the Parliament House was satanic. Why are you here then? And he was really cocky about it, you know. Well, ask Brittany Higgins what she thinks of Parliament House. Ask the people who've been subject to some of the evil machinations that have gone on in there, and the lack of action, once again, to clean the place up. Look at some of the deals that have been done behind closed doors to bring about legislation that has been absolutely detrimental to the people of Australia. Look at all of those things and tell me that that place hasn't been the seat of evil. It has been, and I'm not being dramatic about it. There's a very uneasy feeling inside that place. Another reason why I wouldn't want to do it. And for all the people who hold the signs up at the rallies, you know, hoodie for Prime Minister, thank you, but don't wish that on me. And also, it's not that easy. You can't just say, oh, we're going to vote for Hoodie to be Prime Minister. The system doesn't work that way.
Yeah.
It doesn't work that way. I'm approaching my 70th year. I'm not going to be doing that sort of stuff. I'm not into that stuff. I still want to catch a brim. I still want to mow the lawn. I still want to spend time sitting next to my beautiful wife on the couch and realising how lucky I am. I'm losing that. And I'm not going to forego that forever.
Yeah, maybe I'm an old man too. I just want to go fishing too, Graham. I just want to go fishing and forward driving. Yeah, I mean, it really is a servant leadership thing. In I think it's Canada, they literally, with the Speaker of the House, it's voted on by both sides. They literally, it's tradition to carry the person that they nominate, that wins the nomination, into the seat, because it was supposedly historically a dangerous position to have. So you really had to be like, it was definitely serving the public. But now it's become a place of privilege. Now it's become, you know, a situation where you can rule it over people. And what's going on right now is just in society around the world, we're just having that correction where we're like, okay, we need to remind ourselves of why the Anzacs fought so hard. It's not a given. Freedom was never free. It was paid for with the highest cost in blood. And this is why we have in our constitution free travel across the borders, across the states. This is why we're guaranteed certain rights. Apparently we do, but the Prime Minister's got, I don't know, he's got some Joe Biden syndrome. He's forgotten.
You know, Joel, we talk about the Commonwealth of Australia, and we need to look at what's going on in the Commonwealth of Canada at the moment. Canada has always been viewed by me as Australia in the fridge, right? Australia in the freezer.
Yeah.
And to see the absolute dictatorial, narcissistic behaviour of the Canadian Prime Minister should send a shockwave through everyone in a Commonwealth country. I mean, Jacinda Ardern is capable of that. Make no mistake. And I think they are both educated at the World Economic Forum. What has happened to the truckers in Canada? I mean, the Shire of Ottawa, the Council of Ottawa, has passed legislation to seize the animals, the pets of the truckers who've been arrested, and euthanize them. I mean, these truckers were united. They weren't trying to overthrow a government. They wanted the mandates dropped and the borders open for them to be able to travel freely without having to be tested and without these mandates. And Trudeau has watched and coerced Parliament into bringing down legislations which is destroying solid everyday Canadians. And we've seen it happen in Australia, and we've seen it happen across the pond with our brothers and sisters in New Zealand. And as I reflect on the sacrifice of the Anzacs, Joel, I'm reminded what actually got them there. There were greedy dictatorial powers who were fighting for control of their part of the globe, creating situations where the citizens of the world were used as cannon fodder to further their egos and their greed. We look at situations like Germany. We see Germany that suffered after the end of World War One at the hands of what the Kaiser put them through. The Treaty of Versailles made the life for the average German impossible. And along comes the little corporal who stands up on a platform yelling at people and telling them that he's going to give them their freedom, and he's going to endorse their rights, and he's going to make sure that they are the great nation of the world again. And despite his best of intentions, 6 million people got murdered and 20 million people died as a result of his actions, and they said and did nothing. I've never in history seen any form of government overthrown by another form of government, whether it's dictatorial or democracy overcoming communism, that's ever lasted too long without having to go through the same machinations again. We have to look at the world, the history of the world, the reasons why these things have happened. We have to understand that replacing a shabby democracy with a shabby dictatorship is not the way to go either. We have to be careful what we choose. We have to be careful of the decisions that we make. And sometimes we need to be careful what we wish for.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And I think that people need to understand that you should be absolutely terrified of what you're capable of. Yep. Because when you realize that, when you realize what you can do, both for good and evil, then there's no such thing as sitting on the fence. Then there's literally, you actually have to do something with that. And if the last 2 weeks has demonstrated anything with the success, a lot of people have seen around the States with these great news stories, that's because of you guys working together. That's because of you all standing up and speaking up. And I'm glad you mentioned Jacinta Ardern. So obviously they had their big convoy to Canberra because they were inspired by the Canadians, but also the Australians. They saw what we ended up doing and they were inspired by it. They flooded their capital. They flooded it. And the Prime Minister was like, okay, you've said your piece. Now we want you to leave. She told the police basically to clear them out, get rid of them. The head of police, I do believe it was the commissioner, he basically came out and said, no, we don't have any plans on that. They have a right to peacefully protest and we're not letting them go. And essentially she threw her toys out of the basket. She didn't literally do that. She took it fairly well, but she didn't get what she wanted. And that was where that news story came from, which I read before. She folded and basically said, because there was a news reporter that said, is that what you wanted? Did you want them to remove the protesters? And she said, well, look, all we've got to deal with is the fact that this is the situation now. The police are not going to remove them. So she had to fold eventually. She was not very happy about it. And then she came out with the news saying that the nation's vaccine pass and mandate system will be lifted once New Zealand is through its Omicron peak in March. Now, you guys in New Zealand, the smart ones would probably not trust her, which is good, and keep the pressure on. But yeah, that is that one police officer, that commissioner, the power of one man to say, no, this is what's going to happen, or woman, is amazing. And that is the cost if he did nothing. Imagine what he did if he did nothing. This wouldn't be happening. So in your own lives, whether it be your family, whether it be your democracy, whether it be speaking up in your profession, think very long and hard about the action of nothing. In Germany, they had this thing called the Good German, who basically was an enablers for the worst kinds of Germans, like Hitler. And if you want to see history repeat, do nothing and just let your fellow Australians suffer. But if you don't, and you want to be a truly alpha male, alpha female, speak up, because that's what this is truly about. Free thinkers versus those that are reliant on government.
I want to send out a challenge to people in Australia who are disgusted by certain aspects of this new world that we're living in. It came to me last night. I've made no attempt to cover my lifelong pornography addiction. Thank God it's over. Thank God it's over. But for years, I struggled in that addiction, never once giving a thought to the fact that I was supporting an industry which supported sexual slavery and servitude. I was supporting sexual trafficking because I was watching pornography. If you're sitting at home concerned about the protection of children and the protection, and you're concerned about sexual slavery and you're watching pornography, then you're disqualified. If you have a real anxiety about 5G and you're against it and you're arcing up about it and you're sitting at home watching Netflix, then you're disqualified. Why? Because Netflix and streaming is one of the camouflage reasons why 5G was welcomed and introduced into our life, because 5G was going to enable us to do a whole bunch of stuff. Even what we're doing now, we're probably doing on 5G, Joel. It was enabling us to do a whole bunch of stuff to live in our addiction to convenience. The thing about 5G is, apart from any sinister health ramifications it has by the radiation it emits, it is also the tool by which facial recognition and all the other QR coding and things that are going on around the world, which are taking away our freedoms, exists, and it is a function of that. So if you're really wrapped in your Netflix and you're making a stand against 5G, you need to think, because you may be disqualified. If you're against the New World Order and you think the New World Order is wrong, and by the same token, you are dabbling in cryptocurrency because you're looking for a quick buck, then from my understanding, you're actually dabbling in the currency of the New World Order, the New World currency. If that's what you're doing, then are you disqualified from being critical of the New World Order? I think this is what the Bible means by get out of Babylon. We need to get out of those systems which we're drawn into, which inadvertently support the subjugation of the peoples of the planet. And so I challenge every Australian to really think very carefully about the things you're adamantly against, and ask yourself in what ways you're supporting them by the actions that you fulfill in your everyday life. And believe me, when I think back on what my addiction caused me, what pain and suffering my addiction may have caused other people because I just happened to log onto a free porn site, it's very sobering. It's very, very sobering. So I just want to throw that in the mix.
Yeah. Fun fact about porn, since, this is not something I usually talk about, I'm usually on the politics, but I was listening to Dr. Deborah So. She's a sex biologist in America. She came out and said that one of the big reasons why a lot of porn addiction comes up is because it's a lot of it is actually out of procrastination. And so a lot of people don't realize that, sometimes, if you just sort of, there's that task that you really want to do, sometimes you procrastinate and, you'll go on the porn and you sort of, waste an hour or 2 hours or whatever, because you do not want to get that job done. So really think about why that addiction is there, but by no means am I an expert in advising people. I just thought that was something interesting that Dr. Deborah So said. I think she's written a book about that. But
well, to be honest with you, Joel, I believe every addiction is driven out of the pain of not being loved and being rejected. It's a Band-Aid mask to put on a deep-seated pain, and most people feel that. And that's what's been beautiful about this movement that started up, this community, because people are realising they're not alone and they're connecting. And it's been wonderful. It's been a silver lining in the midst of all this drama. But for me, I felt so wretched as a human being for most of my life, and I felt rejected and unloved for whatever reason, that my addiction was the mask that I used to cover up the pain of my feeling of rejection by society. I don't feel that anymore. I haven't felt that for a long while. When my addiction started to fall away, when I looked at the mirror and I wasn't disgusted by who I was, when I accepted that Christ had a role to play in healing me, and that made it. It was a slow process that got me better. So that's why it's important that I say we need to do everything we do with compassion and peace. We need to love on each other like we've never loved on each other before. And we need to stop condemning one another because we're driving each other into pain. And in actual fact, somebody told me the other day that the stats on porn in the last 2 years have gone through the roof, and I'm not surprised.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. It's heartbreaking. I think the lockdowns were terrible for that. Yeah. Everyone, I want to wrap this up because this has been a nice, short and sweet conversation with Captain Graham Hood. But I really hope that you guys had a really interesting idea of how the We're All Going to Canberra sort of protests have changed the scope of the country. Now, obviously, this is not something we're taking credit for. This is something that Australians, that God, that all the good people behind these stories have done. And it's really been a global effort as well. It really does feel like we're having a flake, the flakes falling off our eyes moment, because this is happening globally as well. And I just really wanted to take this opportunity with Graham to encourage you, to let you know what's going on around the world, to stop and smell the roses. Is it over? Absolutely not. Absolutely not. We're not done. Just this week, we heard that the teachers are going to be mandated their booster jab. So we've still got fights on our hands in New South Wales and in other states. You know, in my opinion, it's not good enough that the nurses weren't actually. It's not good enough that they're not mandated the booster jabs. I actually want a lot of the nurses and healthcare staff that lost their job to be paid back pay. I'm not happy that they lost their jobs. I think it's ridiculous that they lost it.
It should be reinstated.
Absolutely, and they should be reinstated immediately. I mean, the fact that we're importing workers from overseas to substitute our teachers and the hole that we've left with the nurses because of these mandates is ridiculous. If we're not mandating the boosters, we should be getting these people back into the job straight away because they did nothing wrong. They did nothing wrong. And all the scientists are basically reversing, and they're trying to cover their butts now because of what's happened. What do you got there, Graham?
Michelle just handed me a note. You better add a couple more things to your list, Jolie.
Yeah, awesome.
No masks in New South Wales from Friday. No more masks in New South Wales from Friday. No QR codes anymore in New South Wales. Just been announced.
Excellent. Absolutely excellent. That's brilliant.
No QR code, no mask.
If they don't have QR codes, there's no more track and trace because there's no way to track and trace. That's pretty good news, guys. The mandates are one of the last things left in people's employment. You shouldn't be asked that. And the very last thing to go, I think, will be international travel, obviously, because it's complicated with countries and all that not being mandated jabs. But once that goes, it's like, okay, we're done. We're done. This has been a wild nightmare, and we can't forget the people that did this to us, and they will be back. They'll always be back. That's why I know I've got a career in this, because they're going to come back with climate change or something else.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. And that's why people should not sit back and say, oh, we're having a victory. And when those things are done, it's all done. It's not done. If this is the kind of Australia we've allowed to happen in the last 2 years, and we say it's done and we walk away, we're allowing them the space to do that to us again, and they must never do that to us again. No way. I mean, even with the ivermectin stuff at the moment, they're saying like a current affair, put the wrong photo up and all that sort of stuff, and we didn't mean it. And they're still coming out saying, oh, ivermectin is dangerous. And not once has mainstream actually interviewed in Australia Peter McCullough, who is the foremost expert on healing COVID. Not once. And when they do that, they will start to get a little bit of their credibility back. So I challenge any mainstream who's looking at this at the moment. Sorry, the kangaroo is trying to destroy my computer. Anyone who is in mainstream who is looking at this at the moment, they need to say, right, what can we do to get some credibility back? Start interviewing the other doctors. Anyway, you wanted to wrap this up.
No, but this is the danger that we've got, Graham. We'll just keep talking. We'll just keep talking, guys. You know, like, this is just how we are. You should have seen our first call. It went longer than the first interview. It was 2 hours. We were just chatting. You could have recorded that and put it out there.
I actually defeated Topher Field in his long chat, or his slow chat.
Really?
Yeah, he was exhausted, and I said, no, we haven't finished yet. And he said, oh, look, I've got to go to bed. You know, I think he smoked 4 cigars and drank a bottle of Dimple or something, or whatever he was drinking, and I actually talked him under the table. So
Topher's great. I love Topher. Topher's another great person that's been coming out with educational stuff on the elections. He did a good job explaining preferences the other day.
Oh, look, Battleground Melbourne was a tour de force. Absolutely brilliant piece of work, Topher. Well done, buddy.
Absolutely. All right, guys. I want to call it there. I feel like there's a million things I should be saying to you guys right now, except I will finish this with this one last thing. A lot of you are obviously probably thinking about, what's been going on with the upcoming elections. This particular map is something which you're going to become a lot more familiar with over the coming months. Now, I don't know if can you see that, Graham?
Yep.
That is the map of Australia. That is the map of the electorates. Now, this particular map is printed by the Australian Automobile Association, and it shows you what you're looking at right now is that entire map, all the maps of the actual areas. That's the 151 lower house seats. That's where the Prime Minister resides in the House of Representatives. That's every single one of those seats. And with this particular map, and I do have a couple of copies of these maps, and I won't tell you which MPs gave them to me. It has the name of the electorate. It has the name of the person who won it in the last election, 2019. It has the party that won it. You won't be able to see it. And it has the percentage by which that they actually won it. Every single Freedom Party should have a hold of one of these maps so that they can strategize. How can a general win a battle if he doesn't have a map of the landscape? That's what I like to say. And it's absolutely vital that people really understand what's going on here. Now, this is not me showing any particular party that I favor. This is just me showing you guys exactly where we should sort of be focusing our efforts as a freedom movement. Now, this particular tool up here, I don't know if you can see it, but this particular tool up the top right, can you see that, Graham?
Yep.
That is essentially, it's one of the most useful things you could use. So this is all the lower house seats. And that right there is how many the coalition won in the last election. And that is how many the Labor side won. Now, the higher up it is, the more safe the seat is, but the lower it is, the more marginal it is. So if you were to focus your efforts on some seats, you don't want to be focusing on seats up here where it's like 22.5% that they've won the election. You want to focus on the ones down here because you get bigger bang for your bucks. With this particular electorate, it's the smallest margin. It's 0.2%, which separates, the two sides. That's where you really want to get in there and make the biggest change in these electorates. And so I just want to put this out there to get you guys in the mode of, yes, I'm aware there are plans to go back to Canberra on the 29th of March to screw up the Prime Minister's messaging on the budget because he's going to be trying, he's doing terribly right now. He's going to try and reset the clock with new messaging. So it looks like the protesters are going to be there. But we do need to start getting at the same time in the mindset of there's a federal election in May, at the end of May, and we've got to think about which seats we really want to target. And on top of that, this is the last thing I'll show you on this map. This is the Senate results. With the Senate, every state has 12 senators, and every territory here, I'll just show you this. This is really, I hope this is not too heavy, Graham, but this is actually really important stuff. With each state, so you got WA, South Australia, Queensland, New South Wales and Victoria. They have 12 senators, and in each territory, they have 2 senators. In each state, they don't have 12 senators that go up for election every time. They have half of them go up. It's staggered so that the country doesn't radically change too much over the course of one election. So what you're looking at on this right side, this Senate results, is these are the senators on this left side. They're the ones that are up for re-election this time around because they're set to resign from Parliament. But these ones right here are the ones that are safe on the right side. They're not up for election until the following election. So we've got some freedom senators like Senator Gerard Rennick. They're not up for re-election until 3.5 years from now. So they're basically saying whatever they want from their own convictions. It's a lot safer for them to do that. But these ones right here, they're up for re-election. And in my opinion, I think that what's going to happen this federal election is there won't be many freedom parties that win seats in the lower house across the country. I think that what will end up happening is the battle will really happen in the Senate, and that will be where the balance of power is decided. Now, that doesn't mean you don't run in the lower house. It's very important. We might get some amazing results, but I do believe that we might, if the Prime Minister doesn't change in the next week or so to Peter Dutton, I think that we'll be looking at a situation where the Senate, the lower house will be captured. We'll have Anthony Albanese as the Prime Minister, but he won't be able to get much done because the Senate will be holding him accountable. He can't get any legislation through. Mm-hmm. So get your popcorn, guys. This is election year.
The proposition of an Albanese Labor government, when we look at this, the way the states have been acting, and Albanese's abject, almost intolerance of people who are against the narrative. I mean, I go back to my initial comments. You know, the two-party system or the four-party system in this country is flawed dramatically. It is flawed. So anyway, look, I want to say one more thing, Joel. I want to state very, very, very clearly that I will not endorse any action that leads to violence, any action that is unlawful, any action that has the potential to cause anybody harm. And I want people to remember that and to recognise that. I'm not laying down the law. I'm just saying that's not what I speak for. And if at any stage I see that happening and I see the majority of people going that way, then I'm getting in the truck and I'm driving home. End of story. We have to do what we do lawfully with respect. If we need the constabulary to be constables and act as peacekeepers in our society, we need to start treating them with respect, even though some of them have been not so respectful. But we saw what happened in New Zealand. I have chatted with AFP about the rallies that were happening and some of the requirements that we needed to keep people safe. And I reiterate, I had a phone call from an AFP inspector who was looking after one of the rallies who said, "Today's a big day for you guys. I just rang to wish you well. And if there's anything you need, you have my number. If there's anything we can do to make the whole setup more safe, we're here to do that, and we do appreciate the respect that you're showing us." It's a lot easier for someone in a blue uniform to do something really stupid to people if the people are standing there spitting at him and abusing him. I mean, it's just common sense. So keep it nice, everybody. Keep it nice, and that's what I'm going to do. And if it gets any other way, then I'll just go and catch a brim.
I'll see you up there. I'll bring the rods, Graham, and the bait. Get some bloodworms. Absolutely. I mean, peaceful protest is the only way. That's how Martin Luther King Jr. got results. That's actually something I said on the steps of Parliament of Town Hall on the 24th of July. And I think that even then he was against the laws. What he was doing was illegal, but he did it anyway. And the people eventually came around because that's what peaceful protest does. And I think that we're seeing overwhelming success. Even the major parties. I saw an article by Christina Keneally talking about how she was sort of lamenting the fact that she didn't get to see her father who died in Canada because of the interstate travel. I mean, I'm starting to think that there might actually be votes in this for the even the left wingers that are running in the election. They're even sort of changing a bit more as well. But we'll see what happens. I'll believe it when I see it. And who knows, this may only last till the election. But either way, do your research. Don't trust anything we say. Go find out who's running in your electorates so that you can confidently say, I'm empowering you with my vote. And if they screw up, you vote them out. You get someone else in that you do trust that has a better track record. But Graham, more power to you. God bless you. You've been doing a phenomenal job. Thank you for your efforts and for going your own operation so that you could stay in Canberra. And a lot of people were looking to you for guidance while you were there. And and thank you to the Australian people. Thank you to God. Thank you for everything that everyone's been doing coming together. And did you have any other last messages for the people?
I want to thank the veterans who took the point on the march on the 12th. I've said this before. It was suggested that I march at the front with them. I was with them for 30 seconds and I just felt unworthy to march in their ranks and I fell back. those men and women who marched at the front are an inspiration, and we thank them for their service. And I think at every march they should take the point, because they've earned the right to do that. And so, yeah, I just pray that God will bless everything that we do for the glory of the kingdom of heaven, and that means for our ultimate glory. So I want to pray it out, if it's all right.
Yeah, please. Absolutely.
And I want you to look at me, actually, while I do it. Conversation.
Okay, sure, go.
God grant me the serenity to accept the things I cannot change, and the courage to change the things I can, and the wisdom to know the difference, living one day at a time, enjoying one special moment at a time, accepting hardship as a pathway to peace, taking as Jesus did this wretched world as it is, not as I would have it, and trusting that you, God, will make all things right if I just surrender to your will, so that I may be reasonably happy in this life, but supremely happy with you forever in the next, is my prayer in Jesus' name for our nation and our people. Amen.
Amen. Absolutely. Thanks so much, Graham. I'm looking forward to sending this out to everyone and giving them that encouragement that there is light at the end of the tunnel, and we're experiencing it now. Lots to do, lots more to do. Remember, everyone, keep an eye out for the people that are empowering you, not making you a slave to them. And yeah, let's onwards and upwards, as they would say. You guys will notice that today there's no donate link. I want to thank the people that have been donating behind the scenes, allowing me to keep the lights on. And but what I do have up is a Telegram link to my Telegram. I think it's at 35,000 people. The reason why I've been putting it up a lot the last month and no donate links is because I really need to get you guys off these platforms. Graham Hood has 125,000 followers on Facebook for now. Don't forget that they got rid of Craig Kelly's account, which was over 100,000 followers a year ago. That was a year ago. And if you're thinking that they can't get rid of you, they can, they will, and it's only a matter of time, especially in a US election year, 2022, and also an Australian election year. So please get onto my Telegram. Once you're there, I can send you wherever you want. I can send you to Graham's. I can tell you what's going on, but I need you to get over there. I promise you, I won't spam it so that you keep getting all these messages. I know I find that annoying too, but that's what's up. But thank you, everyone. If there's 1,000 of you listening, yep.
Sorry, no, go on. I've got to say one more thing.
No, Graham, say it, please.
Hoodie's helpers, far out. Look, what a group of people. They are amazing. These are everyday Aussies, thousands, tens of thousands of them in groups, not only in Australia, but now all around the world that are forming up, doing amazing work. I didn't start it. Somebody else did. I've got to keep saying that. But today, I mean, where I live is fairly remote, and getting a bunch of flowers is not something that you can automatically do. There has been a bunch of flowers and chocolates and a balloon with a get well message on it and a beautiful card in transit to us for the last 3 or 4 days. And the effort that people took, there were people driving from one town to another, moving it, giving it to somebody else. And it finally got here today from the angels of Hoodie's helpers.
Yeah.
These people are beautiful. I just want to thank you for your wishes. I want to thank you for the joy that you bring into our lives. I want to thank you for the joy that you bring into the lives of the Australians that you help. And some of you are professional people, and some of you are just mums and dads who just want to make someone a cup of tea. I mean, I love you. You're just amazing. Thanks, Diana. Thank you, Anna. Thank you, the team who sent that, and more power to you guys. You're just beautiful. You've made all of this worthwhile. And if I lose my Facebook page, does that mean I can go home?
That means you can go fishing, yeah.
Oh, okay, bring it on.
All right, guys, I'll let you go. You guys have a good night. There's 1,000 of you listening now. Give this one last share so everyone can see it, get it out there. And I will see you all later. Thanks so much, Graham.
God bless, Charlie. Bye, everyone. Good to see you.
Bye, everyone. Ciao.